Thanks very much for joining us, Tom.
Thank you.
Yeah. So let's kick off with your career in the IT sector and cybersecurity. How did you come about this?
I ended up doing IT because I got put into a project whilst I was in the police.
Right.
They figured it was easier to teach copper systems analysis than to teach people who'd done finance systems how to build an integrated policing system.
Right.
So I learned SSAD from McDonnell Douglas because the theory was we were going to drive a case tool and produce 4GL intermediate language. And as the youngest on the project, I got nominated to go and do all the difficult technical stuff.
Right. So you're in the police here in WA?
I'm the cyber threat manager for WA Police.
Yeah.
I'm a public servant.
Yeah. So when you started, that was with the WA Police, was it?
No, it was with the UK Police in Bristol.
Right.
I'd just done 9 years carrying a shield and going to riots and stuff like that.
Right. Yeah.
And then they volunteered me for this project, and so it began my history with IT. I mean, it began before that because I was always breaking into games.
Right.
You ever remember Zork? It was a text-based game.
Right.
You could spend hours just searching for the right verb for the room you're in.
Oh, okay.
So I ran strings on the executable and found out what the right verb should be. And kind of from there it went on.
Yeah. So what year was it that you moved into that?
87.
Right.
Just in time for the Morris Worm in 88.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
By that stage we had a Unix box and I had to patch it so that the first actual internet-based malware was my baby, sadly.
Right. Okay. How did that go?
Not too bad. We got patched against it. Luckily, we weren't attacked by it because we were still in the foothills of wrestling with internet protocol.
Right.
But it was scary.
Yeah.
The first time was, other than an academic issue, and we had to patch for it because we were the police.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So when did you move to WA?
I came to WA in the tail end of 2000, so we applied after I came on holiday in 97, and
Right.
The Pauline Hanson language thing came in a couple of years later, so we managed to get the appropriate number of points. But
Right.
at that stage, I was already a member of the ACS because I had been a member of the BCS and it applied.
Yep.
There was a story when we were coming on holiday of a bloke who, his wife fell ill and he could have found a job, but he was on the wrong visa and he'd have to have left the country to come back. Except if he was a member of a local organisation. So I kind of went,
Right.
I wonder what the ACS is doing. So
Yeah.
I joined the ACS in 96. And when we migrated in 2000, it got us 45 points.
Oh, wow. That's I didn't realise that was part of the scheme. That back then.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, that's the good incentive to join on its own.
Yeah, well, kind of no, because I got a 3-month contract down the phone to do network management of main roads.
Right.
On day 2, the website got hacked. So they kind of went, anybody done Unix? So,
Right.
as the sole representative, I had to do the forensics, rebuild the website, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And from there, it's just rolled on, really.
So you joined the WA Police when you migrated, or?
No, I came in as an ICT skilled migrant.
Right. Yeah. So you've been working in cybersecurity now for, what's that, 30 years?
It's going to be 35 September.
Right.
So, yeah, I got me CISSP in 2004. Because of the fact that I had done the interview down the network there, able to say you've been doing security for the National Health Service.
Right.
And away we went.
Yeah. So how did you find the difference between the UK sector and the Australian industry?
It was a bit of an eye-opener in the sense that a lot of the stuff that was merely being spoken about in the UK was a reality here, like FPOS. I mean, because it was, all the banks are so close together, clearing was much quicker to do manually than it was.
Right.
But when you look at the size of WA, they had to do FPOS because nobody could get the tapes down in time.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Or manually. Back then, they would have been still manually clearing checks in the UK too.
That's right.
Yeah. Yes. Very different geography.
Shock.
Yeah.
Wow,
Yeah.
I can do all this remotely. Wow.
Yeah. So apart from that, what were your first impressions when you stepped off the plane?
When we first stepped off the plane was on holiday, and apart from catching up with my brother, which was a great joy, you're kind of going, wow, look at the weather. I like this. Where's the beach?
Yeah.
And then you get the ABC and kind of go, should take 15 minutes. An hour later, because actually the scale is 5 times better.
Yeah.
It's kind of, going to Geraldton is the equivalent of driving from Bristol to Birmingham or something like that.
Yeah.
And you're kind of going, and that's barely a foot on the map.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So you came over, you started working with the WA government. What
No,
areas?
I was working on main roads on contract for G
okay.
Capital IT Solutions,
Right.
who lost the contract to CSC, but they gave me a permanent job because I'd done such a good job with the incident response.
Right.
And we took on loads of firewalls for Linta and Alcoa and government departments and God knows who.
Yeah.
And then they had a realignment where they went from security being part of field services to a stovepipe for security itself.
Right.
And they created the global security line of service, and I moved into that.
Right.
Where I became the lead information risk manager for WA, and spoke to the board of Woodside and God knows who. And after a few years of that, where there was 5 LERMs, and we were just heading up to the GFC, so I left CSC and joined the police, mostly because of the fact that they'd had me working on a global contract where the bloke who was our lead did not understand that 5 p.m. Dover time is 5 a.m. WA time.
Yeah.
And after a year of proving the point that actually I'm a team player, I kind of went, Bally's, I'm out here.
Yeah.
I want to work for somebody in the same time zone.
Yeah, that's curse of time zones. Yeah, that it's particularly when you're working for a North American company, they don't quite get it.
Yeah, and it was funny that although Ghana was nominally part of their time zone, and they should have been doing the incident response, 9:30 every Tuesday, once a month, the Australian financial system would get attacked because it began with A. Guess who had to do the incident response?
Right.
It was great.
Yeah. Yeah. So moving back into the police, was that a big change for you?
It was because, on the one hand, although you're only spending 0.1 of an FTE working for a particular customer, you do tend to get involved at the same kind of stage. So you're not seeing stuff from cradle to grave. Whereas with police, it's like, oh, here's the security bloke, we'll ask him. And you're following it all the way through until it becomes reality.
Yeah.
And although I had the right background for it, it was kind of interesting that you're kind of going, so who's doing this? Well, that's you then.
Right, you own it. Yeah. Yeah. So how did you get involved in ACS?
As I say, I joined the ACS in '96 and kind of went from just ordinary member to senior member when I hit 10 years. And I've really become involved ever since through partly joining the national bodies and partly getting a fellowship. Yeah. Which, I mean, I'm hitting my 20th anniversary for my CSSP, so that's kind of says something about my determination.
Yeah, sure it does. Yeah.
And the practicalities.
Yeah.
But I think one of the things that is a worry for me is the fact that we don't seem to be making as much progress with professionalism as we should.
Yep.
I mean, ICT should be a profession in the same sense as lawyering and doctoring and accounting and whatever.
Yep.
Because when you get right down to it, actually it's not something that you can do in 5 minutes.
Yep.
How much every CEO thinks he's got and decides his mate P who's got a phone and knows what he's doing.
Yeah, right.
I wouldn't do that if I was you.
Yeah.
All you'd have to do is ask, I work here.
Yeah. That, but you're right, this is a big issue for the industry in general about the professionalism.
Yeah, and I think if you're going to join the profession, then you should be ready for pretty much anything. To know who to talk to have somebody to mentor you, to spot the dodgy situations arising as they arise.
Sure.
So that you don't get sucked into court cases, which can be painful.
Yeah. or just the drama of being compromised or hacked in some way. Yeah.
And to a degree, my background was the right one for the agency because of the diversity of experience I had. So not just networks, not just end systems, not just servers, but the whole schmuck.
Yeah.
So to a degree, making sure that you've got that level of breadth to your skill set is probably important, particularly for security, because they kind of want you to do it now.
Yep.
And doing it now generally means having enough familiarity with whatever it is that's been compromised to just fix it, stop the bleeding, and then call somebody else in to help.
Yep.
So you're kind of an ICT GP.
Right, that's a good way of putting it. Yeah.
You know, not necessarily a master of anything, but you can pretty much patch most things.
Yep. And
Like a
identify.
mechanic.
Yeah. I would imagine too, a lot of the cybersecurity side is the human side of it too, people falling for phishing.
Cybersecurity is all about people.
Right.
It's all about how people use technology, and the problem is that although, frameworks, ISO 27001, NIST 853, COBIT, blah, 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 blah. We've got so many security frameworks because managing cyber risk is a good idea.
Yeah.
Just no organisations do it. They all have lip service to making sure that the audit is correct, which means that effectively they're 2 years out of date every time they hit something new. Like the thing with the Apple M1 series CPUs, it came out last week, and basically it's a thing where you have to buy a new phone.
Right.
Because otherwise it leaks your encryption keys.
Oh, okay. Right. I was completely unaware of that.
Yeah. You have to stay current.
Yeah, well, absolutely. That's part of that professionalism.
Yeah, and I think one of the issues of professionalism is that, particularly in these days of AI taking over the world and whatever, you have to be ethical about it.
Yeah.
So if the CEO chooses not to ask you and goes ahead and accepts the risk anyway, you have to go along with that.
Yeah.
The fact that you might know better isn't particularly possible or popular, because when you say, I told you so, they kind of go, I should have asked. Well, you should have asked.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. So with that, you're on the Professional Standards Board of ACS.
Yeah.
How do you see professionalism evolving in the computer sector?
I think it's being driven by some of the technical benefits that we're getting, things like AI, where people are kind of going, robo-debt, bad idea, and we're just going to do the same thing again. Yeah. Why? It's not just, let's take the data science and figure out how to use anonymized data sets for a benefit. It's more along the lines of, should we be doing this at all? Yeah. And that's something which ACS, I think, has got a hand in helping develop the position. Yeah. Because, for young people, particularly those who are coming into the profession, they just see the dollar signs. Right. Some of the people up at ECU, where I did my masters, are dropping out after year 2 because the money that's being dangled by startups is too good to leave behind. Right. Now, unless they're ethical, they're going to come a cropper pretty soon. Either that or get chewed up and spit out by whatever entrepreneurs driving the latest and greatest thing. Yeah. I mean, we can ask Sam Bangman-Vile how that comes out. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, well, the ethical side of it isn't particularly high on the priorities of a lot of the startups. I think the fact that he's been brought to justice is kind of down to the ethical standards of the programmer who allowed him to do it. He did what he was told, but he ratted out on him afterwards. That's what you should do. Yeah. Yeah, as opposed to not doing it in the first place. Well, if you're accountable for something as a CEO, you're accountable for something as a CEO. It says on the OICD that you should ask for professional advice when it's something you don't know about. Yeah. Well, if you want to cover yourself up, you just don't ask for the advice. Yeah. Easy. Yeah. So how long have you been on the Professional Standards Board? I think we're coming up for 2 years officially. Right. Because the restructure, I got appointed just before the restructure, so they didn't count that. Oh, okay. Yeah. So it should be all right for the next couple of years, I think. Yeah. So what directions do you see things, do you see ACS going with this? I think ACS are in an interesting position. If they put the pedal to the metal and start getting involved in stuff, then we're probably going to be able to have a significant influence on the way that things are being brought to the table. You ever heard of the Trusted Information Sharing Network?
I have, yeah.
Right, I'm a member of the TISN for the communication sector group and for government and for a couple of others.
Yeah.
But the idea there is that you should be able to trust the information you're receiving because it's coming from your peers. The fact that it's helping the national security situation in the sense of making sure that transportation, finance, data processing are all done ethically, different problem. But it does address the fact that it's all based on people, and it's the people of Australia who are going to benefit.
Yeah.
So the Digital Transformation Agency, who are the sponsors for a lot of this, are trying to come up with something where we have a national presence for the SFIA, the Skills Framework for the Information Age, so that all organisations can participate in that scheme rather than just isolated ACS or whoever. And we have a place in the professions of Australia to try and establish ourselves so that people can trust us. Because I mean, it's no longer clicks and mortar; it's just clicks.
No, that's absolutely true. And that push around Sophia SFIA that seems to be a very big push at the moment for ACS.
And a very important one, I think, because actually one of the biggest problems we've got is the fact that, like, my history of police has been that we've had to deal with people who've we deal with criminals. They lie. And one of the particular individuals I was dealing with, we found that he had been taking logos from company sites, blowing them to A4 and typing over them.
Right.
And HR departments didn't realise that you have to ask to see these are current CISSP, these are current member of the ACS.
Right.
And get them to prove it. Now,
Right.
He just got away with it because he lied and lied and lied. And got people fired.
Well, and I would imagine under the older systems, that's very hard to counter, that you've got to do that due diligence.
It's a people thing. HR departments don't yet deal with IT skills in the way that they should, because they'll accept anybody's word for it. You can walk in off the street and become an IT professional overnight. The fact that you don't know what you're talking about, different problem.
Right.
The fact that you've never actually been tested or accredited to a particular standard, different issue.
No,
and that's where I think ACS has probably got the front foot, because we can get to talk to people like the personal professional bodies and the CEOs of organisations and whoever, and sort of raise the game from their perspective so that they only employ appropriate skills in the appropriate places.
So this touches on a point that I keep hearing with the fellows interviews, is it's just the widespread pervasiveness of technology, and that being trusted is probably one of the core parts of that now.
And I think that's something where my experience comes into play, because we deal a lot with cybercrime. And it's there was a report out by the UK national body for heads of police forces a couple of weeks back, which said that approximately 50% of crime is low-value internet fraud.
Right.
Which is volume crime by anybody's judgment. And yet the general duties people, the patrol officers, are unequipped to deal with it, because they don't really have the background or the experience or the support to be able to do it properly. So people are finding themselves with headlines saying, I've lost my life savings because of a click of a button because the banks haven't been helpful, and the cybercrime guys are going, not a crime. I clicked OK.
Or you're going into the local police station and as you say, the general duties officer has no idea how to deal with it.
I'll refer you. To who?
So how do you see that changing?
At the moment, the UK push to make banks accountable is one way of tackling it, and probably from a legislative perspective, that's the easiest option.
Right.
Because you just make the banks accountable for it. But in practice, banks are pretty good at avoiding liability, so they just put another phrase in the contract that you don't read.
Sure.
And you sign at the bottom and away you go, and it's all your problem. Which is okay, apart from the fact that there are huge amounts of money being lost to foreign intelligence services to underground banking scams and
Yeah.
whatever. And the only way we can get back at them is through either raising the education of people on the ground, or making the systems they use trustworthy.
Yeah.
Which is stitching together stuff in the background and using professionals to do it.
Yeah. Is that that last part of having those systems, are we dealing with a big problem with the legacy systems that we've got still kicking around?
Now I'm going to get philosophical on you.
Okay, that's all good.
The real problem we have with the audit industry is the fact that it's backward looking.
Yeah.
It's looking at old standards and seeing whether you comply with them or not. And did last year's policies apply? Okay, well that doesn't address this year's threats. So for us to remain safe, we have to invest a lot more in being proactive.
Yeah.
And in making sure that we're aware of what the current set of risks are, doing something about that. And that means that although the profile of the standalone systems that the bank has and that Apple has and whoever, nobody's looking at the whole way they stitch together.
Right.
And that's where the crime comes in. And the crime is this a 420 or 402A secured system? No, I don't care.
Yeah. It's where the gap is.
So that's the problem, and in a sense it's a civil problem because although it might be a cybercrime, it might be a cybercrime in somebody else's jurisdiction, and there's nothing holistic on the back end that's going to stitch it together apart from us.
Yeah, right. And the international nature of this, where the perpetrator could be sitting in St. Petersburg or Shanghai, that I imagine makes it a much harder thing to deal with too.
Yeah, I mean, I've given evidence to district court because the guy who was doing the offence was actually in WA at the time.
Oh, okay.
But we found that out because he was using a system in Canada. We had to fly the guy from Canada to give evidence. So although he was based in WA and it was caused by WA activity, the fact that he was using systems all over the planet, different problem.
Right. Yeah. Which puts the global side of it. So coming back to that, I mean, again, how do you see ACS working in representing the industry in that environment?
Well, at the moment, I suspect that although it's a cybercrime problem, the fix is likely to be finding a method for providing recompenses and global.
Yeah.
So although UK banks have got to make it right, Australian banks do not, like the Chinese banks or Russian banks. So when you come to having an insurance scheme that says, okay, I've done everything right as an end user, you don't end up carrying the liability can because the banks have gone to contactless stuff, and that's using FPOS rather than the credit cards.
Yeah.
Because the liability shifts from the credit card companies who used to underwrite internet transactions to you.
Right.
So that civil liability is now an end user problem, which is why we're seeing the headlines.
Right. Okay. Yeah, because that difference between FPOS and credit cards does make a big difference for the consumer.
And there's controls for things like making sure the daily limit on a credit card is whatever it is, and having a throwaway card that you can use on the internet safely because you're not going to lose you much.
Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily translate to FPOS.
Right. Yeah. No, that's true.
Because the banks are using your money rather than their money.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very much so. So let's just go back to your experiences with with ACS. So apart from getting the, what was it, 45 points?
45 points.
Yeah. What else have you found over the years as ACS, how it's worked for you?
ACS works because people believe in it. In a lot of senses, you find out about stuff from peers that you're never going to find out anywhere else. Excuse me. Because you're part of a professional grouping, you can actually reach out to people who know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
And you're going to find out the truth relatively readily, rather than having to flog through a billion internet pages and a squillion adverts,
Right.
all of which are going to lie to you.
Yeah.
And learning how to make sense of what the differences are. That's probably a thing that's of value. I mean, I know academics, I know other practitioners, and I know that I can reach out to them should the need arise.
Right.
and they know that they can reach out to me.
Mm. Yeah.
So if there is an issue, you can help fix it.
Mm. So you've got that network in place.
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah. So what would be your advice? I mean, you've got a pretty unique story of getting into the IT sector. What would be your advice to somebody that was looking at getting into it today?
Most people are trying to look for the big dollars, and the big dollars usually means jobs that people don't want.
Right.
You know, you have to offer big dollars because actually it's really hard.
Mm.
So if you want to build a broad experience and to do with the people aspects of IT,
Yeah.
then actually you probably need a job where you're the sole responsible person.
Mm.
So maybe join a small company, learn from them, then graduate on up.
Right.
If you go searching for the big dollars to start off with, you may find them, but you might find yourself on the scrap heap 5 years later.
Mm. Yeah. Mm.
So the difference, I think, between a professional and somebody who's looking to make it big is the fact that professionals generally tend to stand their ground. They're there for all issues, rather than just, you know, issues that have big paydays attached to the end of them.
Yeah. Mm. So you see that as a big issue at the moment, that a lot of people are entering the industry just attracted by the dollars?
When I first joined the BCS, there was a thing called the Computer Weekly they used to deliver, which had, you know, pages and pages of recruitment at the end of it.
That's right. Yeah.
They all had programmers with huge amounts of dollars next to their names, and all those COBOL programmers are now out of a job.
Right. Yes. Mm.
Things change.
Yeah. Mm.
So what you tend to find is that people who don't learn to adapt, who don't have the broad experience, who aren't able to turn their hand to pretty much anything, tend to end up on the scrap heap relatively early.
Yeah. Well, we saw it at the turn of the century with the HTML designers. They were cruising around in Porsches for about a 3-year period, and then they were suddenly, back delivering leaflets. Yeah. So you're sitting on that board. Have you been involved in any other boards or any other
on the
functions?
accreditation committee for
Right.
so what tends to happen there is that various universities want to get accreditation for their courses, so that people can practice in Australia. So a lot of it comes out of international students wanting to be able to extend their visas and stuff like that. But what you tend to find is that over a period of time, Bloom's taxonomy doesn't really keep up, because it's talking about specific levels of expertise that maybe we don't have in the courses that universities provide.
Right. Yeah.
So you have to nudge them towards getting it right.
Yeah. No, I can imagine that is a big task as well.
Yeah, because I mean, at the moment there's a big push for spreading sideways. So you want to have an accredited course done at, say, Toowoomba, and the next thing you know, they want it in Colombo as well.
Right.
Okay, well that's kind of globalisation by the back door, but to make sure that the solar cord allows us to have appropriate recognition for these things, they have to apply the same standards. Now, that comes down to people at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you're talking about a culture where it's all done on contract, you may not have the same continuity that you're going to get in Australia. Yeah. So some of the things we're asking them to do depend on them playing ball and getting the right people in their job. Yeah. And they don't want to do it because people are expensive.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're seeing that a lot, are you, where Australian institutions are looking at moving to offshore campuses?
Yes and no. The Australian universities that are based on strong revenue streams are looking to diversify, and they have been probably since the pandemic. Right. Because you can deliver learning remotely much more cheaply than you can with real people. Yeah. Problem is that the learning stops when the video stops. Right. Yeah. And you can find people with questions at the end of it going, yeah, but can you go over that bit again and explain it in English? Yeah. In more approachable language. No, so that's what the video says. Right. And if you've got somebody that doesn't know what they're talking about delivering a video, yeah, I'll just ask somebody, I'll get back to you. And 6 months later, they're qualified and they still don't know what the answer is.
Right, yeah, which comes back into your broader point about professionalism and lifelong learning. Yeah.
Now, if you're an organisation that really wants to foster the ideal of university thinking, where you get a broad experience of life and you get education that's going to last you for the rest of your life, then you're probably not going to be looking for lots of online stuff. You're not going to be looking at digital badges and things that have a shelf life of a prawn sandwich.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Oh, lots of badges.
Yeah.
You still don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I was on a mailing list where a guy had a secret on his email that said, okay, you have a PhD, just don't touch anything.
Right.
Which is kind of the truth, because you know, in a sense, the people who know the most about the least are the academics.
Yeah.
And they're the current judges of whether the accreditation should be passed on to particular courses.
Right.
But at the same time, you're kind of going, how much practical skill have you got on this? Have you done it?
Yeah.
Well, I've advised a lot of people because the research says this. Yeah, well, not so sure about that.
Yeah, this is tension. So something so I've been with ACS for 5 years and in various other things for a lot longer than that. One of the constant complaints from employers is that the universities and the TAFEs are not putting out graduates with those job-ready skills, and there seems to be pushback from the academics that, well, that's not really our job on giving those specific vocational skills. What's your thoughts on that?
You should be able to assume a certain standard of interaction anyway. But if your focus is on social skills, then actually you're probably not really looking at the right place.
Right.
Because if you want people who are great at technically, you come to ACS. If you want people who know about how to use IT, you come to ACS. If you want somebody who's great at touchy-feely teamwork,
yeah,
go someplace else, because actually you're not going to find it amongst us.
Right.
That's not what we're teaching them. And actually my experience tends to suggest that that's probably a bit of a porky anyway, because Computer Weekly, back when we used to get it weekly, the headline was, Britain needs more hybrid IT managers. You look at the press, it's, we need more hybrid IT managers.
Yeah.
Okay, I've done all that. You're not listening.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Yeah, right.
The problem is the fact that businesses, although they want to embrace IT and whatever, they're going to be tanking an awful lot of businesses by creative destruction through capitalism, because they're not aware of the fact that they're not asking the right questions.
Right. What are the questions they should be asking?
Instead of worrying about whether the customer's going to buy stuff, can I do this safely? Because if you can't do it safely, then you probably shouldn't be doing it at all.
Yeah.
That's an ethical issue. And the ethics that we're teaching IT people, this means that when you come to see a programmer and say, I want rainbows and unicorns, it's going to go, neither of those exist, I'm sorry you can't have them. That's not going to be a popular thing from the average CEO who's going to jump up and down until he finds somebody who does. And he won't be a professional programmer.
Yeah.
He'll get what he wants, but he'll take the company.
Yeah.
His choice.
Yeah. So to finish up, what are your broader thoughts on the directions of the tech sector and ACS in particular?
I think that probably ACS is relevant to the minute if we can grasp the political nettle between the universal application of SFIA and the need for more IT people globally. Making sure that we have the right people is where we can shine.
Yeah.
Government are probably going to cast around to find what the best answer is. And the best answer is probably going to be somebody who's much more invested, much more, Microsoft or Apple or someone who's going to say, this is the answer that you're looking for. Not in Australia.
Yeah.
In Australia, we need something that's going to work for Australian people.
Yeah.
Not help out the NSA.
Yeah, and on top of that, have the vendor priorities, as you said before, the vendor making a profit.
Yeah, I mean, we're currently a charity, not for profit.
Yeah, both.
So we want to make sure that that remains the truth, and that we can represent actual professionals who are doing work in the business and on the business,
Yeah.
and make sure that the contributions that ACS is able to make gets proper support at the appropriate level. And that may be government, because I mean things like the GovID thing they've just announced.
Yeah.
Making it so that you can use a government ID to go online and prove that you are who you are. Okay, that means the government's investing in IT.
Yeah.
Who should they be asking? Probably us.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of work for us to do there.
And it's a challenge for a small organisation, because I mean, in global terms, we are a relatively small organisation.
Yeah.
But if we can kind of keep the truth and honesty as our basis, then we can probably make sure that we remain relevant. Whereas, you know, a lot of organisations, particularly those who are out for profit, may become irrelevant in a few years' time.
Yeah, right. Well, on that point, anything you'd like to finish up with?
Not really.
No? Okay. Well, Tom, thank you very much for your time on that.
Thank you.
Thank you.